Hello, my dears. I am Johanna Takonis, and I welcome you to the Deconstruction of CPTSD podcast. In this episode, we talk about the anger that is a very consistent companion during our healing, the so-called angry teenager you might have heard about, and how to deal with the anger. So let us talk about it. I wanted first to thank you for your patience. It has been an event-rich time with death and cancer in my environment. I sometimes genuinely get the impression that a higher power is telling me to stop making this podcast. But since it's the only right path I see for me, onward we go. You might have seen a quote like this: "Healing can be so hard. It's a constant battle between your inner child who is hurting, your inner teenager who is angry, and your current self who only wants peace." And there's a lot of truth to that, but not in the way it seems. To give my title away, the angry teenager doesn't really exist, but we get to that in a bit. What we do have is loads of anger to deal with during our healing and our interactions with PTSD. It is usually the most obvious emotion to show the PTSD underneath, and also the one that will destroy your life, if you are not careful. That is why it's crucial that we understand it and learn how to remove it from our lives, as quick as possible. We first talk about the inner child, then the so-called angry teenager, then how to deal with the anger, then uses of anger, and then managing the anger. When we talk usually about the inner child, it refers to your core needs, feelings, and character. Or you can also call it your core personality or true self, the person you are by yourself or the ones you trust the most. But because of errors, because of parenting or accidents or abusive situations, can make a child not grow up. The child doesn't learn to properly be an adult, and so just starts mimicking being an adult. So it ends up being a child in an adult body, puppeteering the body without truly understanding what it is doing. And of course, that person gets more and more overwhelmed because life just gets harder and you learn and you grow, but that child can never really grow because it's just mimicking the experiences, but never really growing itself. So if you feel like constantly overwhelmed and don't know really what you're doing, or not feel like an adult and just overwhelmed with life in general, that might be a sign. But how do we recognize an overwhelmed child? Usually, they often have emotional outbursts. They struggle to control and manage their emotions, and are often, because they're overwhelmed, have trouble containing them. They also struggle with the greater emotions adults have, and lose control constantly over them. And it is understandable that they have loads of anger and frustration. They constantly seem to, erase one fire just for the next to pop up. And things will never be fluent or easy because of their mimicking and not really understanding. And they lose for that reason control over situations all the time. Because as soon it is getting on an advanced level, they fail because they only know how to copy the basics, and higher levels require understanding. And of course, this also leads to difficulties with relationships because they cannot display the full capacity of emotions an adult has or should have. They of course also don't have the full range of affection and romantic behavior that is expected in an adult. Child relationships or teenagers' romantic relationships are just much simpler. And they often feel like they're faking it. They don't just feel like they're faking being an adult, but also in their job that no one should trust them to do anything because they don't really know what they're doing. And that actually can be false because often our skills don't require our maturity of as an adult. Often can be the imposter syndrome and the source for the imposter syndrome. Because in the end of the day, an adult should and can be a child, but a child can never be an adult, and it will always fall short of it. It's why it's so important to grow up. Some say they never want to grow up, but that's a very bad idea. Because as life goes on and more complicated, you can maybe ignore it for a bit, but eventually life will hit you hard. And then, if you're not an adult, you're gonna have a very, very bad time. Like I said earlier, the angry teenager doesn't really exist. It is still the inner child, but a sort of upgraded version. Inner child 2.0. Because now the inner child is more confident and now makes demands and complaints. It no longer accepts what is the status quo and its situation, and therefore no longer a passive victim, but going into the offense and taking charge of its own life, or at least trying to, like the first tentative steps. And that is why it's impossible to reason with the teenager, because it isn't really there. It's more of like the voice of the inner child, or the projection of the inner child. Because unless you address the inner child, the teenager will not go away. Only then will the teenager either change topic or disappear completely. Because like I said, there's a true point to it all. As the saying goes, anger is the big boss of pain. And it doesn't matter if it's physical or emotional or in whatever way. And that big bother will only ever go away if you address the pain. And this is the step after acknowledging. Because the first step of changing or making change happen is acknowledging there's a problem. And in this case, it is a pain, or the old hurt, or whatever it is. And then the second step is to target the problem. And that is where anger comes into play. Anger is great at removing the problem, if it is directed correctly. So how do we deal with the anger? By asking a simple question: why does this make me angry? Or, differently, why does this hurt me? In the end, it always boils down to that. And that is why it's so important to find the pain underneath, by asking these why questions. Similar how we use them in other areas, the why questions are extremely useful in finding out the reason underneath. So when we start feeling the anger, it's important to just stop, breathe, and take a moment to calm down, and then ask yourself the question. And generally speaking, it's usually old pain. And no, it being unjust is not enough. So we humans have a built-in wrong and right and injustice system, which is the reason why we strongly respond to injustice and unfair treatment. It's also found in monkeys. But it needs to be more than that if it gets a strong reaction. Maybe it's an unjust that you personally experience, or at least witnessed. As the old saying goes, a hit dog will bark. And I don't mean it not necessarily because what is said is true, but because what is said is reopening or reminding you of an open wound. And it will happen again and again, and it will remain a vulnerability and an easy way to trigger you or get you to respond, or you becoming aggressive, as long as the wound is there. So we have to tend to the open wound, obviously. And for that, it is absolutely important to be tender with yourself and to accept that you have been hurt. And then we have to go through the emotions of it that are connected to our pain. This helps us with processing what happened. And one way to do that is asking yourself, like, what was right? Like, what should have happened? What was good that happened? And what was wrong? What shouldn't have happened? What failed? What was done that shouldn't have been? If we manage to remove the pain, the anger will disappear. This can either happen by acknowledging or removing the trigger that caused you to respond, or what caused the pain. And this way you usually can redirect the anger to destroy the target of your pain and anger. So what are the uses of anger? And generally speaking, anger is often a sign of healing, because it shows that the brain is searching and detected something is wrong, and is now trying to remove it, therefore heal, and will always be drawn to the topic that is causing the disturbance and wants to remove it. Anger is ideal for that. But that is why it's so important to direct the anger towards the issue. That is why an early detection is absolutely crucial, before it can harm those around you, or potential things you didn't intend to, or yourself. The trigger that causes the anger always directs towards trauma. Not always in a very clear manner, or you think that might be the reason for the pain, but you always get pointed in the right direction. Because anger is a defense mechanism, so you can attack the harm causer and live, so to speak. It is the fuel for the fight. But that mechanism goes a little bit sideways if it's psychologically, which is why we have to sort of step in and redirect the anger towards a more beneficial and productive direction. Anger can also be a warning sign or an alert of conflict between your inner values and events that are happening or actions you are taking, and this way to harm to yourself and your integrity. And then it is wise to ask yourself, should I have done something? Or shouldn't I have done something? And that you step too far away from your own path or values. And last but not least, is that anger enables change in yourself, your environment, situation, or dynamics, or anything really. Be it that clean your place and finally bring more order in your life, or be it by stepping outside your comfort zone and trying to find a solution for your problems, or get the ball rolling for something you wanted to do for ages, or to stand up for yourself. Finally, after so many times, be it to other people, depression, yourself, or abusers, or anything really. Because in the end, the antidote to despair is action, and anger enables you to take action. Which leads us to managing the anger. To recap, if you want the anger out of your life, you must address the pain underneath it and stop it from causing more harm. And with PTSD usually means something bad happened and someone usually came to harm. So someone was wronged. And sometimes that means you wronged yourself. But especially if you were wronged by a loved one, it can be incredibly hard to accept. And I know many who abandoned healing because they rather go under with the ship of that loved one didn't do that to them. It is also so much easier to be angry at yourself because you can always beat yourself up because you are always in reach of yourself. But in the end, you will not move forward until you address the correct issue. No matter how much you try to bargain and think if you do that or if you punish yourself long enough, it will go away. Only the truth will set you free. And of course, it is difficult to remove anger entirely, especially since it serves an important function in a healthy human being, but you can definitely redirect it to better suit you, even long after your PTSD is history. Because if we strip it back to the basics, anger is nothing else than a mechanism of the brain to enable change. And usually change means some things need to get out of the way, or need to be removed, or things need to get moving. And you can use the anger to find or remove the pain, depending on your stage of healing or progress in this issue. And the most important step is to accept the pain and move on. Be it because you have to accept the loss, that you were wronged, that you failed, that you were defeated or lost. It doesn't really matter. In the end, you have to accept it, and that you won't get your revenge or anything or payback. For your own sake, let it go, like I talked about in a former episode, and remove that person out of your life. Or alternatively, you need to forgive yourself. Be it because you were weak, you let yourself be fooled, you did the wrong thing, whatever it was. You need to take the lesson from it and then forgive yourself. And accept that it happened. In the end, that is a way to inner peace and moving on. That was it for today's episode. I hope you found it helpful and that you are safe and well. And, as always, if you have any questions or feedback and the like, please let me know. More information and transcript you can find, as usually, under johannatakonis.com, and links are in the description. You can also find me under @johannatakonis on YouTube, Twitter /X, and Instagram. I hope to see you next time. Stay safe, take care, and have a wonderful time. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments, my socials, or a message.